This show's been brought to you by Anarchy Wear. They are a great organization who sells clothing, banners like what's behind me, hats, all kinds of stuff. And they're absolutely amazing. Not only do they put out awesome content, they also make awesome things like this. And if you're a Spooner fan, you have this. Let me stand up. I didn't sign shit. Lysander Spooner. If you're a Spooner fan, you'll totally understand. If you're not a Spooner fan, get in my DMs and I'll let you know, because he's one of the greatest to ever do it. This flag behind me, enemy of the state. Man, that's Murray Rothbard, the greatest to ever do it. I'm a Rothbardian. He is my favorite economist. He is my favorite anarchist, libertarian, whatever you want to call him. Fantastic material that he's put out. I highly recommend you read his books, but Anarchy Wear has everything from bold to cute and modest. You know what I mean? So like, check them out at AnarchyWear on X, aka Twitter, at anarchywear.ca on anything meta, being Facebook and or Instagram. They're awesome. I love those guys. They're doing great things, and I highly recommend you follow them and get some goods from them, man. I love everything I have from these guys, and they're amazing. And let me throw this in for you. If you use promo code BudsnReality, Buds, letter N, reality. I know you know how to spell. If you're watching this show, you're pretty smart. I know you are. Anyways, get at them, get yourself some gear. And if you use the promo code BudsnReality, you will get yourself 15% off. Who doesn't like a deal? So get at them, check them out. They are great, awesome people. Thank you for the sponsor, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the BudsnReality Show. I'm Sean Collins, your favorite anarchist, and I'm here with the first show of the year. Happy New Year, Mr. Mike Ter Maat. How you doing, sir?
Good. It's great to be with you. Happy New Year to you and your people and your viewership. I hope it's a great year. It's obviously an important year for the Libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party.
This is, it's funny because, obviously it's an election year. Yay. And oh my God, you happen to be running for president in what will end up being the most insane election year probably to date. Until the next one, I'm sure it'll get more wild as we go. But I feel like 2020 was very wild. It was hot, man. We were coming in hot in 2020. Lots of craziness. And I feel like 2024 is going to go hold my beer to 2020. And you're like, hey, it's going to get real interesting out here. And,
I think you're right. I'm not sure that means it's insane. Crazy, yes. Insane, I don't know. I'm kind of hopeful that it'll be crazy, and for the first time, we will be able to inject a little bit of political sanity. It may be chaotic, but as an anarchist, I'm sure you'll appreciate the fact that sometimes a little bit of chaos and a little bit of absence of overarching structure can be a good and healthy thing. I think it'll be our opportunity to inject a little bit of sanity in terms of the political discourse, even if it means, disrupting the political plans of the Republican and Democratic parties. That's all to the good for us.
Which needs to happen. We're desperate for a disruption in our political landscape right now. So much so you came on in either late May or early June last year. So much has happened since then, especially when it comes to foreign policy, man. I mean, we were doing the Russia-Ukraine thing when you were on last summer, and now we're like doing Russia-Ukraine, we're doing Israel. Now we want to go party in Iran. Now we want to party with Taiwan. Now we want to party all over the place. And by party, I mean drop bombs. It's not a real fun party, let me tell you. But
right.
This is where we're at right now, and coming into 2024, and both sides, who would have ever thought in a million years the Democrat Party would turn into a bunch of neocons? But here we are.
They certainly have caught up to the Republican Party, haven't they? When I was growing up, you could find an anti-war Democrat. You couldn't necessarily find too much in the way of an anti-war Republican, but you could find anti-war Democrats. And today that is completely gone. I feel badly, honestly, for people who of a certain age, maybe somewhere between your age and my age, or older than I am even. You know, people who joined the Democratic Party thinking that they were going to get a party that would stand up for, stand up against the idea of going to war every 20 minutes. And that party has certainly let you down and left you behind if that's the reason you joined it. It's a real disappointment. And you're right. It seems like every place in the world is on the edge of exploding. I don't know when people are going to be listening to this recording, so it may well be that you and I say things today that sound dated even by tomorrow, right? Yeah. The Iranians are sending a frigate into the Red Sea, quite literally as we speak, and this is in response to the United States sinking 3 out of 4 of their speedboats that were, of course, attacking a cargo freighter. Maersk has shut down operations in the Red Sea, which I completely understand. If you were a lightly armed or unarmed crewman on a shipping freighter, you probably don't have a great deal of interest in the Red Sea this week. So, we have to wait and see what the United States government decides to do in retaliation for all of this and what the Iranian government decides to do. I just wish that there was more sanity on each of those two sides and folks would take a deep breath and realize that we're on the edge of something really horrible. And I just think that there's a great tablespoon of irony in the United States getting all upset about the Iranian government using the Houthis as a proxy to wage war in the Middle East, when that's, exactly what we're doing with the Ukrainians.
Oh, wow. You just said that out loud, and thank you for that. I'm clapping for that one.
Well, it needs to be said out loud. I mean, we have heard Republicans now maybe not use those words, but in effect saying that one of our major objectives in Ukraine is to degrade the conventional military capability of the Russian army. Frankly, I find that disgusting.
Well, I mean, war in general is vile, and part of being a libertarian or an anarchist or wherever you sit on those sides of the fence, and cap, I feel like a lot of those things fall in the same bubble, but there's labels, and labels are labels, blah blah blah. Anyway, right. I feel like there's only one political party that is for peace and principles, and that is the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
And you're obviously running as a Libertarian president. Now, hypothetically, you get the Libertarian nod. Hypothetically, you win the election, right? You're going to inherit a disaster. It's going to be a mess. And you're going to have some serious foreign policy issues that have to be dealt with in a very tactful way, but in a very immediate way as well, because number one, we don't need to be sending our guys over into things that are none of our business. And number two, it's fiscally irresponsible. It's beyond fiscally irresponsible.
Of course.
So what is your plan if you get in and you have to deal with this now? You have to deal with every proxy and every, what we're in, and now you're going to have to deal with it. What is your plan? What are you going to do?
Focusing on foreign policy particularly, of course, there are, other theaters that we need to discuss, but talking about foreign policy in particular, I think it's important. I appreciated the fact that you said tactfully, because things do have to play out in a certain way to bring along a number of players, both domestically and internationally. However, I think it's important from day one, and even prior to the election, to state very, very clearly not only our principles, but what our long-term objectives are, so that when people get those phone calls the first couple of days after the inauguration, it's not a complete shock, right? So when the first phone calls get made to the heads of state of European powers that says basically, in not so many words, this is your 18-month heads up, right? That the United States is going to be exiting from NATO. And that, we may disagree with how we see certain aspects of the world, but if you, Mr. Prime Minister, for example, if you believe it is in your interest to remain what I would characterize as paranoid of the Russian army, notwithstanding what we have learned over the past year and a half, that it is utterly incapable of overrunning even Ukraine. But nonetheless, if you believe it's in your interest to remain paranoid of the Russian army, you do you, right? It's time to spend 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5% of GDP, whatever you think is in your interest. On some level, it's none of my business. But the United States is no longer going to be your plan A. You're going to have to switch to whatever you used to consider plan B. That's now your plan A. The United States is going to be exiting from NATO. Bringing the troops home is not something that we can do completely in the first week. We can do a lot of it, but with 800 or 900 bases out there, depending on your definition of a base, some of them are subject to contracts, some of them are subject to treaties. I appreciate that. But it's very important that you state immediately where you're going in the long run. Just because something might take a while, right? Just because something might take 6, 12, 18, 24, 30 months, doesn't mean you wait to tell people where you're going. You tell them immediately where you're going, and that will help them make the adjustment, which will reduce a little bit the political backlash that comes with it. And I think NATO exiting is a really good example of that. Similarly, whereas we all wish that we weren't in Ukraine at all, the unfortunate truth of the matter is that we are, and that we can hopefully, probably, maybe achieve something through a negotiated exit by bringing pressure to bear both on the Ukrainian government and the Russian government to settle this down, to come to some sort of a stand down agreement, and then we're out, right? And that's got to be relatively fast. We're talking about months there, not years. We need to let people know that we don't have an interest in a long-term commitment to propping up Ukraine. And we need to make that very clear to the Ukrainian government that that's just not going to happen. And similarly, I think that we need to end this really silly notion of supporting a program of what the United States has called for 3 generations now, strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan and China. I think that it's on some level, and I don't mean this to sound trite and completely dismissive, because I know a lot of smart and hardworking and patriotic people have been working at this, but honestly, it's a silly policy, and on some level, it's stupid. There is no such thing as a relationship which is made stronger, better, that is advanced in any way by some sense of ambiguity. You need to let people know what your interests are, what your principles are, and where you're going, what your strategic objectives are. And for us, that does not include, in the long run, propping up the nation of Taiwan as an independent state. If it is able to achieve that, terrific. And if it is not, would I be disappointed? Tremendously. But I think that we should be tremendously disappointed about Hong Kong. I don't believe that we should be going to war with China over Hong Kong. As disappointed as I am personally about Hong Kong, I sent my daughter to train in Hong Kong. I have a tremendous affinity for the people and what used to be the independent style of government there, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. But that doesn't mean that we should be going to war with anybody, much less a nuclear power like China, over the matter. And so I think that there is an advantage to stating this up front, even if you're looking at a 2, 3, 4-year window to getting to where you want to be. In other words, in Taiwan, for example, Sean, as you know, there are any number of Republicans especially, but Democrats as well, who believe that we have set up, in effect, a self-fulfilling prophecy where we have invited in any number of investors into Taiwan, particularly in technology, particularly in high-end chips, right?
Mhm.
With whom we cannot seem to live because they are so critical to our high-tech infrastructure, particularly with artificial intelligence booming in the United States and around the world, and it playing a major role in our economy, hopefully going forward. We believe that we need to protect these investments in Taiwan. I get that. But we need to send the signal now, not 4 years from now, that if the reason you're making this investment in Taiwan is because you believe that you must invest in a place where the United States military is going to back you up come hell or high water, Taiwan is not the place. You know, can I interest you in Detroit, right?
Right.
Because that is a place that the United States Department of Defense should be backing up come hell or high water.
Amen.
Taiwan is not. And if you were to say that now, the Chinese government, its objective is not to go to war with the United States. Its objective is to make Taiwan a part of the People's Republic of China. It's willing to go to war with the United States to make that happen, but it's not, its goal is not to go to war with the United States. If we sent the signal, Taiwan has a couple of years to get its act together. The Taiwanese government would be able to make the investments that they feel are prudent. Investors would be able to ramp out or ramp in, depending on their decision, but at least they would know, you know, what the score is. People would be able to make appropriate investment decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be Detroit, right? You know, it could be in Paris or Melbourne, Florida, but you make your decisions without thinking that we're going to go to war to protect Taiwan. That's a bad decision. So I think that's an example of something that might take a couple of years to play out, but you're not helping yourself by not starting that clock right away. You need to tell people up front where you're going. And the same thing, I would argue, the same principles apply to the Middle East. You know, we need to send the signal, and I realize Israel feels like a little bit of a different animal because so many Americans have such a close relationship with Israel for a variety of reasons, myself included. But we need to send the signal, look, Israel is an independent state. We should not be giving foreign aid to Israel or to anybody else. It is obvious that our foreign aid has not bought us any influence with Israel, nor with the governments of Jordan, where the President of the United States couldn't even get a meeting a couple of months ago, speaking of embarrassments. Not with the government of Egypt, not with the government of Lebanon, obviously. We obviously don't have any influence over Hamas or Hezbollah or the Libertarian, the Palestinian Authority. You know, what do you get for your foreign aid? You don't get anything except the idea. You get nothing, and you get a liability. It means that whenever one of these organizations or one of these governments makes a decision, in some sense, you're asked to answer for it. And that's not a situation that we want to be in.
Well, no, it's not. And you know, I remember Disclose.tv or Disclose TV or whatever they're called on Twitter. They put up a lot of stuff and it's very credible. But I remember it was the last quarter of last year. I can't remember which month, but it was definitely last quarter. And they were like, the United States is sending money and weapons to Taiwan. I'm like, okay, so they're provoking China, and they're sending money and weapons to Ukraine. Okay, we're provoking Russia. And now we're sending money and weapons to Israel.
Israel.
Which we have been. Israel gets $3.8 billion from the United States before this, period. Like before
per year.
Yeah, per year. This is
per year.
There's no war. There's no anything. This is just what they get from us. On top of, they get to test out our military equipment. They're the ones who get to be the guinea pigs for military equipment. It's no big secret that Israel's the biggest ally of the United States when
Right.
it comes to the Middle East. Obviously, the UK is probably the biggest ally when it comes to the US, but when it comes to the
Right.
Middle East, we're talking Israel. And they probably are.
And we get that. I mean, it's an important democracy in the area. We have important cultural ties, and these things feel personal, but we have to be able to distance ourselves from personal feelings when it comes to these governments making decisions about war and peace, or about anything else for that matter. I've traveled Israel from north to south. Uh, I've I've sent my daughter there for bat mitzvahs. I've sent my son to the Middle East for training in Jordan. Uh, I've traveled the West Bank, Jericho and Ramallah and the Dead Sea, Bethlehem, of course. You know, these things feel personal. There are people on my team who have family there. And a prominent member of the Libertarian Party announced a few months ago that he had lost a member of his family in the conflict in the Gaza Strip. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and so I get the personal connections and how tight it feels. But at some point, we've got to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, we wouldn't expect or demand any other nation to have to speak for us, to answer for the decisions that we make. We're not about to give anyone else the authority to weigh in on the foreign policy or domestic policy decisions that our government makes. And it's just as inappropriate when it goes in the other direction. We should not be on the hook for other countries' decisions.
Absolutely not. We shouldn't be the world police. We have our own problems here. And some people will be like, well, you have to help other people. And you do have to help other people. It's something we should do as human beings, but it shouldn't be by the force of a rule of a gun. Look what all these Hollywood celebrities did for Ukraine and stuff. They raised all kinds of money and sent it there. And they're doing it, for Israel and stuff like that. They're doing it through voluntary, charities and whatnot. Why do we have to be forced by rule of a gun to take care of other people when we can't even take care of our own? I live just down the street from the infamous 8 Mile. Okay. The infamous 8 Mile. Eminem made a movie about it, 20 some odd years ago. I'm just down the road from that, literally. And there's people living under bridges off of 8 Mile right now. And there's veterans living under bridges off of 8 Mile right now. Now, if, I'm for no taxes. Obviously, the tax system, the IRS, burn it all down. But if we are going to be forced into a tax system, why aren't we taking care of our own people before we take care of somebody else?
Well, you're exactly right, Sean. And as much as we all hate the tax system, I think we have to admit that a piece of the reason that we hate it is that the government does so many stupid things with our money. It's just one more reason to hate it. Ethics and autonomy aside, just the moronic nature of the decisions that our government makes. And I agree with you. If these citizens want to make donations, contributions, if they want to go over someplace and fight, look, you do you. But it still bothers me that our government does so much in terms of propaganda in attempting to successfully manipulating the mainstream media, especially. Obviously, the White House has no influence or control over Sean Collins, and I like that a lot. But the White House has manipulated the mainstream media into being so pro-Ukraine, right? And that I believe that this is a big reason why there have been so many wealthy citizens giving money over there. And I don't mean to suggest that they shouldn't have the right to do so. You do you, but I don't think the government should be involved, even with the propaganda,
No.
which it has been. I find that very offensive. And maybe it's a second order level of offense from propping up a war and sending billions of dollars to keep Ukraine fighting because we believe that we have to degrade the Russian army. That's a first order mess. but I don't like the propaganda out there trying to support it either.
This show is sponsored by Infinite Zeal Syndicate. You can follow him on Twitter at _Infinite Zeal. He is a great liberty-minded fella that just wants to share the message of liberty, and also has fantastic merch like this hat I'm wearing right now. You see me wear it on every show. He's a great gentleman, and I highly suggest you give him a follow because he's one of the good ones, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's get on with the show. Now, speaking of propaganda and gaslighting, we'll say, because and in the economy, we're going to segue into something else now, because right now we're in a situation where the government and the media is literally telling us citizens that the economy is fine, the GDP is great, there's job growth, everything is fine, act natural. This is what they're saying right now. They're literally on saying, oh yeah, everything's great, and there's more jobs than there's ever been, and since before Trump, and blah blah blah, and whatever, man. It's all bullshit. We all know it. We all know it. But I just, I watch Redacted with Clayton Morris a lot. He's a great source of information. And he, within the last month, had a Kevin, what's his name? Kevin Demerit, the Lear Capital CEO, on his show. And they were talking about the economy, okay? And what the real economy looks like. And what the real economy looks like is bankruptcies are at the same level as 2008 right now. Late car payments are at the same level as 2008 right now. What happened in 2008, guys? Oh, wait, there was a big, massive recession, a housing market crash. Right when I was 28 years old, I'm trying to figure out life like I'm supposed to be getting ahead in life. And I had to go through that. I mean, that was my generation. Like, holy shit.
I know, and I'm sorry about that. Look, it is true that the White House and the rest of the administration is talking about how great the economy is. And I get that. It's part of a political cycle. Everybody stretches the truth a little bit when you're a power-hungry politician and not really interested in the interests of the American people. You're just interested in maintaining your own control. So none of us are really shocked. But you put your finger right on something. The reason the economy looks even as good as it does, statistically speaking, I think there are two big reasons why you can make the statistical argument sound better than it is, but it's a shit show nonetheless, if I may say so. Look, number one, a lot of the growth stats are based off of coming off the 2007, 2008 financial debacle. So to say that incomes are up, even real incomes are up, is really distorting the truth. If you were to look at it over a 10-year period, you would get a very different look. For example, you've got people in the White House saying, that inflation is down. One economist recently said, representing the White House's interests, recently made the mistake of saying that prices were coming down. And it's funny because that is the impression they're trying to give you, but they can't actually say that because it is such a lie, right? Prices are so high compared to 3 years ago that all you can really say is that the rate of growth in prices has slowed, right? Inflation has slowed, but prices are still insanely high. This is the reason why real growth in terms of the wage rate and incomes is either around zero, in many categories negative or barely positive, but real growth in income, real growth in wages is not there because inflation is so high, it has eroded the purchasing power of any wage gains that we have made. And so you see a lot of just the gamesmanship of statistics and trying to say that things are better. Things have gotten better in this category or that over the last 2 years. That's just so fundamentally dishonest, the way that people spin this. The other thing that's so important, Sean, you put your finger right on it, the amount of debt that's out there. A lot of the debt in both the public sector and the private sector has been accumulating the past several years, ever since the the checks came out from the federal government, right? That actually diminished some of the debt in the private sector, but exploded the debt in the public sector. But if you were to attach these two together, you would see it's just a continuous uphill climb. The debt is one of those things that makes the economy look better than it actually is. If you take into consideration the fact that so much of our income has to go to servicing past debt that's been accumulated over the decades, you realize that the purchasing power of our wages and income is actually much, much less than what it used to be. You need to correct not only for inflation, but you need to correct for all that debt service that's out there, much of which has to go outside the United States. Much of it goes to investors who purchase government issued bonds, but could otherwise be going to much more productive use. So it really erodes our long-term productivity. And this is a real problem, because now we're getting into an area where it's not just that our purchasing power has been eroded and our incomes don't feel as good as the statistics that these bullshit economists would try to feed you. It is also the fact that our economy is not set up as well as it could be for growth in the future. And thank goodness that we've got new technologies coming online, everything from, blockchain that's going to help move what we call a smart economy. We're all hoping that different types of currencies compete in the future, that either causes the Fed to be removed, as I advocate for, or at the very least, hold their feet to the fire and give them some incentive to behave for a change. And we're all hopeful that AI can play an important positive role in the economy going forward. And let's hope it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And by that, I mean the federal government of the United States.
Man.
So there are reasons to be optimistic, right? But we have done everything possible from a public policy standpoint in the federal government of the United States to hold ourselves back and to set us up for failure. It is only because we have a hardworking population, a relatively healthy population, and one that keeps developing new technologies that we have reason to believe that our economy will outgrow the stupidity of our federal government.
Which would be nice, but unfortunately the federal government gets in the way of the economy all the time with just regulations in general, like business regulations or any type of regulation. They want to regulate prices. They want to regulate how you run your business. They're literally trying to tell Chick-fil-A right now that they have to open on Sunday. The federal government is going to private business and saying, hey, you better open up on Sunday. They don't have to do shit. They need to tell them no and stick to their guns, because there's no reason that government needs to be involved in private business whatsoever. And I'm a private business owner. And I will not let the government tell me how to run my business.
Well, Sean, if the government ever says that you need to do a podcast on Sunday, you can call me and we'll do 5 minutes to check the box. But you are absolutely right. It reminds me of California telling the toy distributors that you need to have. I'm wondering if I'll get the rule was so stupid. I'm afraid I may have forgotten it. You need a gender neutral toy
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Distributorship to go with the boys and girls toys, and you're not allowed to suggest that certain toys are for boys and certain. Oh my Lord, that's just what you want, is the state of California deciding how to market toys. Just the irony here of having man babies in some legislative bureau telling people how to market toys is, I mean, it would be funny if it weren't so disgusting.
Right. But so here's the thing. So we go into this and we talk about how bankruptcies are at 2008's level, and the late payments on credit cards and stuff are at the same level. Now, people are going to come to you as the president of the United States. Okay. You get elected. We're saying you're elected, right? People are going to come to you and be like, what are you going to do to make my life cheaper and more manageable? That's the question that people want right now going into 2024. That's like the biggest one right now is how are you going to make my gas bill go down? How are you going to make my gasoline prices go down? How are you going to make interest rates go down? What is your answer to these people? Because this is what they want to know right now.
I agree with you. There are a few specific things that we can do that aren't just a matter of, broad brush principles, right? One of them is to reduce the extent to which the government spends money, because that will reduce taxes and it will get the economy rolling a little bit stronger. And that's everything from the military to entitlement reform and the stupid things that we do that the government calls discretionary. There are other things that we can do too in terms of deregulating the economy, not only cutting back on the insane number of people that the federal government employs and getting them back into the economy doing something productive and useful as opposed to wasting their time as federal government employees. But I believe 10 times more important than that is reducing the amount of regulatory burden to which all businesses are subject. Yes, in the realm of communications, ending the regime of telling people what they can and cannot say in social media and elsewhere, that's important. But everyday businesses, getting the government out of regulating industry. And one of the ways that you can do that, Sean, the White House, the administration, a libertarian administration, actually has a lot more latitude than we give it credit for. You can do a lot of things without waiting for legislation. You can cut back on staffing. You can break up agencies in reality, if not legally and on paper, by sending employees into other agencies. So you can close certain functionalities. The other thing you can do by executive order is to make most regulations subject to the approval of governors in their respective states, in effect, dumping it onto the governor's laps. So that, sure, in a state like California, that might not make a whole lot of difference.
Or
the
Michigan,
governor of California may say, well, this is a great opportunity for me to look even better by, supporting all this regulatory crap that's on federal legislative books. But there will be some governors that choose to, in effect, nullify a lot of this regulation and show real leadership and leadership that is successful spreads. So I would be optimistic about that. But there are other specific things that we can do too. We need to take the first steps toward ending the Federal Reserve System, and that begins with appointing leaders that do not believe in this silly idea that we need discretionary monetary policy where every 6 weeks we lock 18 people up in a hotel room and ask them, what mood swing that they've had lately and what we should do about the amount of money in the economy. We need a rules-based system and, in effect, eliminate all of this discretion, move toward a policy of zero inflation, which will make Americans' wage growth real instead of fake, boost the economy that way. And this will be the first step toward getting rid of the Federal Reserve System completely, which would be a boom to banking. It would get rid of this silly idea that we should support a central bank issuing its own digital currency, which is a horrific idea. And it would be the first step toward getting out from this regime of bailing out banks every once in a while, every time we go through a recession, which is so critical to getting banks to behave better in between the recessions so that they don't make the dumb decisions that contribute to the bubbles that lead to some of these recessions in the first place. So for all these reasons, there are things that we can do that would marginalize and then eventually get rid of the Fed that would make our lives so much better. And of course, most importantly, cut back on the amount of money that the government is spending and reduce taxation. This whole idea, honestly, I don't know how a politician can look constituents in the face, excuse me, and say, I know things are tough, but we're going to take some of your money forcibly and give it to Ukraine. that's not just fiscally irresponsible. I find that ethically troubling at a real fundamental level.
Psychopaths. These people are literal psychopaths. They don't even ask. They're like, hey, we're just sending the money we stole from you over here so we can keep making money for our central bank because we know this is what this is. You hit the nail right on the head. When it comes to the Federal Reserve, that is the most evil entity in our country today. It's not even close. And if you end the Fed, you will end the wars and you will end the empire. And it'll go in that order because without the Fed, they can't fund these wars. And without the endless printing of money, the empire's over. It is over. And the Libertarian Party is the only party that is saying, hey, we are going to burn this system to the ground. It is over. We're not doing this anymore. Now, how do you feel about competitive currencies then? If you're going to end the Fed, there's going to have to be some sort of form of money out there. Now we can go back to gold, silver. There's Bitcoin. There's other cryptos out there. I'm not a big crypto guy. I do believe in Bitcoin for the most part. But I'm more of a precious metal guy myself. But, you know, competitive currency is the way, and decentralization of money is the way, and decentralization of banking is the way. There's no need for central banks and or bureaucracy and or governments to be control of your money, my money, or anybody's listening to this show's money. Your money is yours. It belongs to you. You earned it. You worked for it.
You're absolutely right. And you're also right that the way to go is competitive currencies. Look, you can get rid of the Federal Reserve System without undermining the US dollar. And I believe that getting rid of the Fed will actually make the US dollar stronger, which I'm okay with as long as you don't artificially strengthen it, as long as you don't artificially bias your system in favor of it. So this is one of the reasons why I believe that we need to block the Fed or the Treasury Department or anybody else from issuing its own blockchain-based currency. I think that we need to give cryptocurrencies an opportunity to compete and anybody else the opportunity to create a currency that'll compete with the dollar. There is nothing on the horizon today that can come anywhere close to challenging the US dollar. But we need something in the future to do exactly that, to hold the government's feet to the fire if they're actually going to continue to issue the US dollar. But that can't be through the Fed. We need the Fed to end, put in a rules-based system to control how much US dollars have been issued so that we have a zero inflation environment, and then get rid of all of the regulatory and legislative requirements that make it so difficult for these other currencies to compete. One of the big ones, as you know, Sean, is this idea that we use the US dollar-based clearing systems to impose sanctions on other countries, most notably Russia and Iran, but anybody else that we're unhappy with at the moment. We need to stop doing stupid crap like that. We need to allow other currencies to compete and other nations to participate in the US dollar if they want to, but we need to get out of this idea. And I appreciate, you know, you said you're a metals guy. I appreciate that. And the reason you are is because the US dollar sucks in terms of the rules that are in place that protect it, and at the same time undermine our standard of living by pumping more and more dollars into the system. It's a crappy way to live.
Well, here's the facts. You know, we were under the gold standard until 1971 when that son of a bitch Nixon just decided to exit. And there's a reason why he did that. And it was because the United States government under the gold standard, and this is a fact, you can look it up anywhere, guys. Find it in End the Fed, man. Read End the Fed by Ron Paul. But no, the United States government was not allowed to borrow beyond its means under the gold standard. The standard would not allow it. So then when that son of a bitch Nixon, and I'll keep calling him that for the rest of my life, he's a son of a bitch. He's one of the worst that ever did it. You know, top 5 for me, top 5 worst presidents for me, Nixon.
It's a competition.
Oh God, there is such a competition. But you know, that's when the printing really got out of control because there was nothing to stop it then. There was nothing for them to just say, hey, you know, we need to control this shit. No, they're like print, 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 print. And just think about it from when the year I started voting in 2000. Well, I'm sorry, voting for president. I'm sorry. I started voting in 1998. I was 18, but it wasn't a presidential year. 2000, right around the time Bush took over, the national debt was right around $5.5 trillion at that point. And then 2008 comes after 2 wars and all the bullshit that he did. Is just over $10 million. As a matter of fact, I remember Rand Paul dressing up as the national debt for Halloween that year, and he was $10 trillion. You know, and everybody was like, oh my God, you know, Ted, what? Now, before the year ended, we surpassed $34 trillion. So we spent almost $30 trillion in 20 years.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely out of control. And you're right. Once you lose, you know, any rule at all, you're right. We came off the gold standard, but we didn't institute any other rule. No. Right? We didn't go from the gold standard to fill in the blank, a silver standard. We didn't go to a rule that said you couldn't expand the money base. We didn't go to a rule that said target zero inflation. We didn't go to a rule that said target a certain interest rate. We didn't go to any rule whatsoever. It just became completely discretionary. Throw the doors open, print what you want, right?
And it's been a free for all since.
That's exactly right. And I do believe that were it not for the rise of the euro, which was a mediocre attempt to create a competitive reserve currency, I think it probably could have been worse, right? The Fed at least had a modicum of competition, and now it really doesn't have any competition at all. And I think that this is a big reason why we've seen so much inflation over the past dozen years. We need competitor currencies, and we need a rules-based system. Whether you go all the way back to the gold standard, we can all, you know, have a food fight about. I'm okay with that, but you know, we need some rule. You can't just go discretionary. Let's let 18 politicians tell us what mood they're in.
Right, and that's what they've been doing for decades now. But now with the thing with competitive currency though, and so much in the crypto world and digital world, you know, I did watch another story on Redacted. Something about Clayton Morris. I just really like the guy. He's how I learned about the brick system, actually, was Clayton Morris. And so, you know, his stuff is pretty on point. And he had Whitney Webb on his show. And I don't know if you're too familiar with Whitney Webb, but she did some really good work on 9/11. But she also came on his show and was talking about this cyber attack that could happen in 24, that the actual WEF is talking about planning. Okay. Now, when it comes to cryptos and stuff like that, this is why I'm a precious metals guy over Bitcoin and stuff like that. Because how in the hell are you going to access your money, your digital money, if there's a cyber attack like they're talking about, you know, with the WEF? And the WEF would love to do that because they're very vocal about a centralized internet. The WEF is a Nazi organization,
a centralized blockchain. Yes, they want to control. They want to control the entire economy, both from a technological point of view and from the point of view of who makes the rules. They would like an international superstructure over sovereign nations. It's a very scary organization. If you listen to these people, at first you might think that they're kidding. It's, you know, it's some sort of sarcastic Saturday Night Live skit.
Right.
But these people are dead serious, deadly. It's a real problem for us. I wish that they didn't have as much influence as they do. But you're right.
Why they have all the influence, right?
because they have so many politicians who believe that it's a good idea to leverage idiots like this to maintain their own power and control.
Well, that, and it's not Klaus Schwab who runs. He's the face of the WEF, right? He's
and a good looking face.
He's their guy. Yeah. So they would think, right? Well, he's not. He doesn't own the WEF. You know who owns the WEF? BlackRock. So it makes total sense that they want to do all these, insane things when it comes to cyber attacks, our one world government, or, you will own nothing, or, eat the bugs, or whatever it may be. When central banks are running the show, this is how evil central banking is they set up clubs like the WEF that want to come after your prosperity and your self-ownership and your property. They want your property. They want you to be cattle. It's so crazy.
No, there's no question about the fact that they want to compromise your ability to control your own property. That they believe that governments ought to have a great deal more control over it. My property includes a lot more interesting food to get us through a cyber attack, by the way, than bugs. So Sean, this is your open invitation to find me in Virginia. So, because it would just break my heart to think about you becoming a bug eater. We can't let that happen.
It won't happen. I'm pretty crafty with the bow and arrow and the crossbow and firearms, so I could hunt my way out of this. But
we've got a lot of hunting surrounding our personal property here, so I think that we'd be able to hole up, and I could use another hand on the shotgun from the second floor here in case we do face the zombie apocalypse.
I've been shooting since I was 4 years old. Funniest story ever. I'll never forget. My dad gave me a 12 gauge when I was like 4 years old. And he's like, yeah, you can shoot it. No problem. I'd shot BB guns before. Those aren't much. I shot that 12 gauge, man. That thing knocked me on my ass. My dad laughed so hard. He laughed for hours about that. And he still laughs about that, but that's how long I've been shooting guns, And so, and it's important, you guys, though, like you have to learn homesteading right now. It sounds crazy and we sound like alarmists when we say this shit, but like homesteading is kind of very important right now. You need to learn how to take care of yourselves and your family outside of
I think there are I agree with you wholeheartedly. And those of us with families, I think that we need to step up to the responsibility of insulating our families from the worst of any of a number of potential catastrophes. Sean, I am a firm believer that we are not going to make it more than a couple of decades. In some respects, I actually think that a couple of decades may be quite a long time.
You're being nice.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we're going to make it a couple of decades before one of, as I would say, one of three, broadly speaking, one of three types of catastrophes happens. One is, and all spawned by bad public policy coming out of the federal government of the United States. One is that one of these stupid military interventions that we engage in, it feels like every few months now, right? One of these is eventually going to trip us into a world war. And just by the law of large numbers, right? Just because I can't predict which one doesn't mean I can't predict that eventually your luck is going to run out. I think that we have metaphorically and possibly, almost literally dodged a couple of bullets. And that's being pretty cold-hearted about the disasters that we promulgated in Iraq and Afghanistan. Quite literally, millions of people died because of our bad public policy. Yes. And are still dying in Iraq and Afghanistan because of our bad public policy. And yet we did not trip into a world war. But I do believe that at some point it's likely to happen if we don't dramatically change course, not just in our foreign policy, but in how we develop our foreign policy. We need to base our foreign policy on a different set of principles and make it much more difficult for a White House to unilaterally commit to military interventionism. This is why I say that we should make it illegal, or at the very least announce from a libertarian administration that there won't be a military intervention without a declaration of war, and that a declaration of war will not take effect without the support of a majority of state legislatures. It has to be much, much more difficult to go to war, and by war I include any sort of military interventionism. I just find it not credible to suggest that you can re-engage in a new military conflict every year and you're just not going to end up in a world war. That's just not a credible statement to me. So that's the first type of apocalypse that I could imagine happening that could potentially really affect our ability as a people. And I don't mean just American citizens, but worldwide, our ability as a people to maintain a society with some semblance to what we have developed here in the early part of the 21st century. And the second type of disaster I fear is a collapse of the federal government of the United States, and with that, taking down the US dollar at a point in time when the US dollar is the only reserve currency. If we had another reserve currency that was doing an adequate job of competing with the US dollar, or more than one currency, it wouldn't be potentially quite the disaster. If the federal government of the United States didn't represent such a huge part of the worldwide economy, it wouldn't be such a disaster. But I do fear that the path we're on, that unmistakably is leading to a financial collapse of the federal government of the United States, I do fear that that will bring down the dollar and create a worldwide recession that, again, is very deep, very difficult to recover from, and therefore really undermines worldwide our ability to maintain a society in a fashion similar to what we've developed up until now. And the third category of disaster that I worry about is more directly a political one. I do worry that if, for example, the Libertarian Party does not have a successful 2024, does not have a successful 2028, does not have a successful 2032, and that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party continue on the paths that they are on, which is to say increasingly bent on a form of authoritarianism that we used to believe couldn't happen in the United States, right? But clearly is happening in the United States. A disregard for the interests of the everyday American, just spending money, taking away people's rights. I do worry that the most important lessons of the COVID regime will not have anything to do with, viruses in the long run. Right. The real lesson is that the governments in the United States feel like they can do damn near anything. And possibly we will learn in the future literally anything. And I worry that at some point there will be a backlash which will be neither political nor nonviolent. I worry that we will eventually trip a revolution that is not the healthy type, right? Not the Ron Paul type,
right?
That is more violent, that is more chaotic, that invites martial law as a response, that invites greater lockdown in response, and it spirals out of control. That's what I worry about. And I worry that something like that would, again, make it very difficult for us to maintain a lifestyle anywhere near what we have grown accustomed to here in the first part of the 21st century. And so I worry that the things that we are doing are leading to a disaster of one type or another, and we need to be prepared. I think it's my job and yours, Sean, to try to do everything that we can to reverse course, to stop the federal government on this path. But failing that, I think that people need to be prepared for a true disaster of epic proportion.
You're 100% right. And I'm going to tell you why I believe that. Because in my personal opinion, and from my studies and from what I've watched and seen, the dollar is going to collapse. And I'm projecting 2025. I think it's going to happen by 2025. And when it happens, it's going to be, whatever president's in charge, whether it be you or Trump or Biden, whoever it's going to be your fault. No matter what, it's always the president's fault. It's never the people who have been screwing the country for decades before that. So you got to be ready to take that smoke when the time comes, you know, because it's coming, you know. But the fact of the matter is not only are we on the verge of a revolution that's not going to be peaceful, they're pushing us into it. They're literally, they are the drivers of this anger and this vile, you know, internal anger that people have for the state right now. Right now, as we speak, they are literally kicking presidents off the ballot in certain states, okay? That's about as fascist as you get. I don't care, folks. And I'm not a Trumper. I'm not sticking up for the guy. But what I'm going to tell you is right now is that there was only one other time that people were getting kicked off the ballot, okay? And that was during Lincoln. And what happened was a civil war, and it got ugly. It was bad. And that was the last time we saw people being axed off ballots for presidential candidates. And
you're exactly right. And where it has happened since then, outside of the United States, you have seen it act as a signal to the ushering in of tremendously authoritarian governments that either find it necessarily to lock things down or face revolution, and typically both, and in a violent fashion. I worry about this very much. And I agree with you. I'm no Trumper. I was in New York in the 80s. I have a long history of disliking Donald Trump, and for a variety of reasons. That's neither here nor there. But this idea of weaponizing the judicial system and the justice system generally to keep people off the ballot is extremely dangerous. And I believe that this is, you know, this is the front end. This is the first wave of it. We can expect Republicans to do the same thing to Democrats when they have.
Trying right now. They're trying to keep Biden off ballots. This is ridiculous.
Of course. And remember, Sean, it wasn't Donald Trump who invented the idea of "I got cheated, I should have been president." You know, that we had Hillary Clinton immediately before him and others before her. You know, she made it louder and was arguably better at it than her predecessors. And he was louder and arguably better at it than her. But this is a phenomenon that is going to continue and accelerate unless and until the American people demand some sanity in place of authoritarianism.
That's right. Now, before we're going to run out of time pretty quick here. So
yes,
I need to ask you real quick. Healthcare, education, those are two important things that people really are like, okay, we need our education to be better for our kids. We don't need no more indoctrination. And the healthcare is obviously, anybody who's paying for healthcare right now knows it is atrocious, vile, disgusting. So what are we going to do to fix these things? What's your plan?
You need to get the government out of controlling how these services are provided. And it is the same situation in so many, you know, the big three industries that we are pissed off about are healthcare, education, and policing. And these are the industries in which the government has imposed the most stupid rules in all three. But let's focus on education, because I think it's the easiest one to analogize to the others from. In education, we eventually want the government to phase out of even participating in providing these services. But the first step has got to be, to the extent to which communities raise money for the primary and secondary education of the kids in a community, that money has got to be available on a competitive basis. You would not put up with any other business, any other industry in cahoots with the local government to maintain a monopoly so that you only had one choice of service provider. I mean, come on, that's blatant bullshit. If it were not the government doing it, it would be a bald-faced violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and you'd have the Department of Justice down on you. But because the government is in on it and controlling it and creating it, we seem to be told we have to put up with these local monopolies, and it's the reason why our schools are so bad. By the way, our schools are bad, not just the public schools are worse than the private schools, which is absolutely true. And by the way, you see when competition is instituted, for example, through a voucher program, you see that the education, broadly speaking, gets better. But I would argue that our schools are bad by comparison to other industries in the United States. We don't complain about other industries the way that we complain about our schools. And of course, increasingly, we know from test scores that our public schools are bad by international standards as well. The same principles can be applied to healthcare and policing. As a cop for 11 and a half years, until a couple of years ago, I spend a lot of time talking about how we have to reform the way that we manage police officers and police agencies. We need a competitive landscape so that a community can hire not just its own public sector employees, but can hire a private sector company to come in and provide services. You would not put up with, for example, the state of Michigan saying, you can't hire an outside firm to pick up the garbage. You would not, as a community, you would not put up with that. But state law says that you have to have your police department run by, one agency. It can only be controlled by one set of public sector employees. You might have a choice of two, right? You might have a choice between your local police agency or the mayor of whatever town you live in could probably fire your police department and hire the local sheriff's office. So you might have a choice of two. Most places in the United States don't even have a choice of two, but two is not a lot of choice. We need same thing in your local education. We need a system where communities feel like these services are provided on a competitive basis, and where the best cops get paid more, the best teachers get paid more, the mediocre get paid less, and the crappy cops and the crappy teachers get fired, just like any other business. And there are analogies to these, but each one has to be handled separately. And in healthcare, we need a system whereby which people see what the prices actually are of the services in which they're engaged. We need a one price system. We need the government to get out of the business of mandating insurance, of subsidizing insurance, of using the tax code to subsidize insurance. The overuse of insurance is, of course, what has blown up the healthcare industry and removed the incentive structure for people to keep their costs down and allow prices to explode. This is all a matter of bad public policy. You don't see a healthcare system as messed up as the United States anywhere else in the world. You see problems with healthcare in other places around the world, but those problems are always idiosyncratic to the stupid public policy that's in place.
You're talking to a guy who went through major surgery last year and had to go through the ringer in the healthcare system. I literally had some of my insides cut out last March. And
well, I'm sorry. I hope you make a strong recovery. You look good.
I feel fine. Like life is good now, and we're all good. I did have some scares though. I didn't have a swell surgery, to say the least. But anyways,
good luck.
Life is good now. Everything works. Everything's everything. But I'm saying that I don't have anything nice to say about the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And I have to watch it because my wife is in school to be somebody in healthcare. So I'm like, she's like, you can't say anything too bad. And I'm like, I hate these people. She's like, just for me. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But like,
look, the system sucks. That doesn't mean there aren't good teachers. It doesn't mean there aren't good cops. It doesn't mean there aren't good nurses, but the system sucks.
It totally sucks. But that being said, though, I tell people all the time, like, competition drives down prices. What we have now is a monopoly in our healthcare due to government involvement. You get them out of the way, you get the bureaucrats out of the way, and then all of a sudden they have to compete with each other. Right now, they don't have to. Their prices are set and they can charge whatever they want. And they're all going to be like, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. And yeah, okay, that's fine too. And blah, blah, blah. And they're all in cahoots with each other. But I use this analogy all the time. Kroger is our big supermarket chain up here, okay? but we also have Meijer and other chains. Now, if there was only Kroger, they could charge whatever they wanted for groceries, however they wanted, however much they wanted, and they could probably say, Cap, you can only buy this much of each item. But because we have a Meijer and an Aldi and a Spartan store and whatever mom and pop grocery store there is, there's a competition. They have to keep their prices lower. It's really simple math.
It's how it works. And to your point, if there were only one grocery chain in your area, the food would be every bit as bad as the high school education is in your community.
Amen to that. Now, before we go, Mr. Ter Maat, as a libertarian, taxation's theft, that taxation's extortion, slavery, whatever you want to call it, it is all the above. What is your plan for taxation? How are you going to get rid of the Fed? Because that's not something, you're not just going to be like, hey, I'm President Ter Maat and we're ending the Fed today. That's not how that's going to work. Let's be realistic.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And as a former professional economist, I have a plan out there on the steps toward ending the Fed. People can go to the website and look at it. Just to give it a quick plug, goldnewdeal.org. You can go to goldnewdeal.org because Gold New Deal is the name of our platform. It's our commitment to the most transformational ideas. Or you can go to mike.termaat.com, which is harder to spell. But if you go to mike.termaat.com, you'll find all of it as well. Look, regarding taxation, I do believe that the big linchpin in all this is we need to end the direct tax relationship between the federal government and the individual. We need to get rid of the IRS as an agency and require the federal government, to the extent to which it needs revenue at all. And Sean, you and I would argue it doesn't need much revenue, but let's leave that argument aside just for a moment. To the extent to which it needs to raise revenue at all, it should go directly to the states and not be allowed to skip over the states and go directly to you and me. Anyone who's ever been audited by the IRS knows it is a lopsided relationship. It is a relationship that does not make sense. States need to be in the business of standing up against the federal government for our rights. States, and look, this is not a silver bullet, right? States do plenty of stupid shit on their own. No question about it.
I live in Michigan. You ain't telling me nothing I don't know.
Exactly. And if you were in San Francisco, you'd be able to say the same thing. But it would give us a fighting chance to have better control over our state legislatures and hopefully have a state legislature grow a pair and be able to say, look, we're standing up against the federal government for you. It would give them some incentive to actually do that. So I'm a big believer in decentralizing power out to the states for a variety of reasons, but this is a big one. Regarding ending the Fed, yeah, the first step is to replace its leadership with people who believe in a rules-based system, to get rid of our stupid style of monetary policy. The rule that I personally like is to control how much money there is out there. You allow the money supply to only increase by 1 or 2% a year so that you have either zero inflation or even maybe a little bit of deflation. But around zero inflation is what the target ought to be. And I also believe that you need to end the Fed's control over bank regulation. You need to end the Fed's ability to issue a digital currency. And you need to end the Fed's ability to bail out institutions, banks especially, but any other institution as well. These are the ways that you reduce the political power of the Fed. And once you do that, you can move legislation against it to end it completely. Because if you don't end it completely, it will grow back these powers. The Fed is an extremely powerful organization. So it all begins with replacing its leadership with people who agree with our way of thinking. And the first step toward that is a libertarian-minded administration.
Amen to that. Now, do you have a cabinet picked yet? hypothetically? Or is that
I
not,
have individuals
is
in
that not
mind,
allowed
but
to be
not,
talked about yet? Is that not allowed?
no. We can't talk about it yet.
Okay.
But we do have individuals in mind, as you might imagine. Have I written a dream team on a piece of paper? Yes, I have.
Okay.
Am I going to share it with you? Absolutely not.
Damn
But
it. No, I'm just kidding.
but I do believe that we are going to be putting together a dream team, and I hope we don't have to wait until June 1st to do it.
I dig that a lot. And convention's coming Memorial Weekend. I mean, this is we're coming to a time where we're going to figure out who's going to get the nod. And I wish you luck. I wish you luck on your campaign. I hope I see you at our Michigan convention in March.
Oh yeah, we're gonna work that out. It's a tricky weekend. There's like 17 states with their conventions that weekend, but none more important than Michigan, of course.
I will be there for sure. I will be one of the delegates there, and so I look forward to seeing you guys. I hope they can make it happen. I'm in contact with LPMI a lot, so I know they've been able to contact a couple of people, but commitments haven't been the greatest as of yet. But I hope, listen up, guys. The rest of you, Recton Wald and Josh Smith and Lars.
Everyone's got to be there.
Guys,
If I'm there, they have to be there.
Come on, get your ass out here, guys.
Yeah, everyone's got to be there. It's going to be a good time. If it's only a subset, that's okay. As everybody knows, if you show up, I'll be nice to you. No promises if you don't show up. You might have some snickering behind your back, but it will be a good time. And Sean Collins is going to be there. And we do need to unify the libertarians in your state, Sean. This idea of having multiple parties, that is some silly shit, my friend.
Thank
We
you.
need to unify that.
So you must have, or maybe you didn't, but I did a couple of shows towards the end of the year last year about what is happening here. It is an abomination what is happening here in Michigan with the LPMI. And I'm not going to be quiet about it anymore.
There's no point in being quiet about it. Look, and we all get it, right? I don't mean to, I don't want to be completely dismissive of people being pissed off. I mean, you get pissed, I get pissed, everybody gets pissed off. I get all that. And good for you for making a statement. Okay. But the time has come, and the time is now.
Yes.
For us to merge these groups together, and you don't have to sing Kumbaya, you don't have to hold hands, but you do have to be in the same party.
That's right.
It's absolutely critical that we as a party get used to the big tent idea that, if you're not the same kind of libertarian that I am, that's okay. You can put up with my ass and I can put up with yours. If you're not ANCAP and, I'm not sufficiently pragmatic, and, we can all fight about that. We can fight about the best method to end the Fed or the best method to get a competitive. We can have those fights, but it has to be inside of the party.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that, because honestly, on some real shit, I feel like you're one of only a couple of our libertarian candidates that can get everyone to rally behind them. I feel like certain people are, going to be like, okay, it's this person or bust. It's this person or bust. It's this person or bust. I feel like Mr. Mike Termaat is one person who can say, hey, that guy's pretty cool, and we're going to vote for him. I feel like you're one of those people who can do that, honestly, truly.
Well, that's because I feel like there are a lot of different kinds of people in our party that are cool, for whom I could vote. And I think that you are too, Sean. I am a big believer that our tent needs to get a little bit bigger. We need to be a little bit more tolerant of each other, even though we're going to fight. But that is who we are as libertarians. We can fight like cats and dogs. We can punch each other in the face at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But by 8, we're having a drink together.
Amen to that. Mike Termaat, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Good luck on your campaign. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in March Till next time, y'all. Or before we go, do you want to plug any more of your stuff? Because I know
Well,
you gave some of your gold deal stuff out there. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's the big thing. Go to goldnewdeal.org. It's easy to spell. It's our platform. There's a link to the campaign website, which is mike.termaat.com. Termaat has 2 A's in it. And so if you're not from the Holland part of Michigan, you might have a hard time spelling that. But if you are from Holland, Michigan, you know damned well how to spell Termaat, and you can find mike.termaat.com.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks, Mike. Till next time. Peace, love, and liberty, y'all. Happy New Year. Be good. Take care.